https 2 gạch chéo www.youtube.com watch hỏi v bằng r v gạch dưới 42 ce bon ooe she hid her baby from the mafia boss until he found them and said both belong to me. Cô ấy giấu đứa con của mình khỏi ông trùm mafia cho đến khi hắn ta tìm thấy và nói cả hai đều thuộc về ta. Cao 10 sao. She thought hiding in the shadows would save her daughter. She was wrong. Nora Blake vanished 6 months ago, fleeing the most dangerous man she'd ever loved, Adrian Morello, a crime lord whose empire ruled the underworld. She took his child, a secret he never knew existed, and disappeared into obscurity. But men like Adrian don't lose what belongs to them. When he finally found her, he didn't come for forgiveness. He came to claim what was his. What began as captivity would become something far more dangerous, a battle between control and choice, fear and trust, running and standing ground. If you're hooked, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The diner's fluorescent lights hummed their endless, monotonous song, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow that made the coffee look worse than it tasted. Nora Blake moved through the cramped space between tables with practiced efficiency, her smile plastered on like armor, her movements automatic. Refill here, clear plates there. Nod politely at the regular who always left exact change and never tipped. 6 months. 6 months of this carefully constructed invisibility. She'd chosen Millbrook precisely because it was forgettable. A dying railroad town 3 hours from anywhere that mattered, where the population hovered around 800 and nobody asked questions. The kind of place where people came to disappear or to wait for something better that would never arrive. Perfect for a woman who needed to become no one. The bell above the door chimed. Nora's shoulders tensed reflexively before she forced them to relax. Every sound was a potential threat, every stranger a possible discovery. She'd learned to function while afraid, to smile while her heart raced, to breathe while drowning in paranoia. "Coffee, hun?" she asked the trucker who'd settled into booth 3, her voice carrying that generic friendliness she'd perfected. Midwestern, unremarkable, forgettable. "Black. Thanks." She poured, smiled, moved on. The ritual of normal life, performed by someone who'd left normal behind the night she ran. Her shift ended at 2. She collected her meager tips, $43, enough for diapers and formula, and walked the 4 blocks to the apartment she rented above the hardware store. Every step, she checked reflections in darkened windows, listening for footsteps that matched her pace, watching for cars that slowed. The apartment was barely more than a room, kitchenette, bathroom, and a space that served as bedroom and living area both. But it was clean, and the lock was solid, and the window had a fire escape. She'd checked the escape routes the day she moved in. Old habits from a life she'd tried to leave behind. Mrs. Chen looked up from her knitting when Nora entered. The elderly woman lived 2 doors down and watched Mila during Nora's shifts, accepting payment in cash and asking nothing about the baby's father or why a woman Nora's age was living alone in a town like this. "She was an angel, Mrs." Chen said, gathering her things. "Slept most of the afternoon, ate all her food." "Thank you." Nora pressed 2 20s into the woman's weathered hand. "Too much," Mrs. Chen protested, as she always did. "Please." Nora's smile didn't reach her eyes. She overpaid because kindness was rare and because Mrs. Chen asked no questions. That was worth every extra dollar. When the door closed behind her babysitter, Nora locked it. Deadbolt, chain, and the chair wedged under the handle. Then she went to the crib she'd bought secondhand and looked down at the only person in the world who mattered. Mila slept on her back, one tiny fist curled near her face, dark lashes fanned against plump cheeks. 5 months old, growing fast, developing a personality that made Nora's heart ache with fierce, protective love. The baby had her mother's nose, her mother's stubborn chin. But her eyes, those devastating dark eyes that seemed to see straight through pretense, those were her father's. Nora sank into the threadbare armchair she'd dragged from a curb, exhaustion settling into her bones. She let herself have this moment, this brief window between surviving the day and dreading tomorrow, to simply feel the weight of what she'd done. She'd stolen a child from one of the most powerful men in the criminal underworld, a man who owned judges and police, who controlled territories and enterprises that spanned the eastern seaboard, whose name was spoken in whispers by people who knew better than to speak it at all. A man she'd loved with a desperation that terrified her. Adrian Morello. Even thinking his name sent electricity down her spine, equal parts fear and something darker she refused to acknowledge. She'd met him 14 months ago in a world that seemed like a lifetime away, when she'd been someone different, someone naive enough to believe that power and danger could be contained, controlled, kept separate from the heart. She'd been wrong about everything. 14 months earlier. The gallery opening in Manhattan's Chelsea district was the kind of event Nora normally avoided. Too expensive, too exclusive, too full of people who spoke in artistic metaphors she didn't understand. But her roommate, Claire, had begged. Claire's cousin's boyfriend was exhibiting, apparently, and they needed bodies to make the space look successful. Free wine, Claire had insisted. Attractive rich people. What else are you doing on a Friday night? Nora had gone because her alternative was grading papers in their cramped apartment, because she was 26 and occasionally needed to pretend she had a life outside her graduate program, because saying no required more energy than saying yes. The gallery was exactly as pretentious as she'd feared. White walls, incomprehensible installations, servers carrying champagne she couldn't pronounce. She'd accepted a glass and was studying a painting that might have been a landscape or possibly a close-up of mold when she felt him watching her. She turned. He stood 15 feet away, perfectly still amid the circulating crowd. His attention focused entirely on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, with dark hair swept back from a face that belonged in Renaissance paintings. All strong bones and aesthetic brutality. But it was his eyes that held her. Dark, penetrating, ancient in a face that couldn't have been much past 30. Those eyes saw everything, through everything. He moved toward her with the unconscious confidence of someone who'd never been told no, who'd never questioned his right to occupy any space he chose. The crowd parted without seeming to notice they were parting. "You're not enjoying the art," he said when he reached her. His voice was low, textured, with an accent she couldn't quite place. European, but faded, as if he'd spent years smoothing it away. "I'm trying to," Nora replied, surprising herself with honesty. "But I'm not entirely sure what I'm looking at." His mouth curved slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. "Neither is anyone else here. The difference is you're honest about it. Maybe I'm just uncultured. Or maybe you're the only person in this room with genuine taste." He extended his hand. "Adrian." "Nora." She shook his hand, felt the controlled strength in his grip, the warmth of his palm against hers. The contact lasted a moment too long to be casual. "Tell me, Nora, why are you at an art opening you're not enjoying?" "My roommate needed moral support for her cousin's boyfriend's debut." She gestured vaguely toward the crowd. "I'm here for free wine and to pretend I have culture." Admirable honesty. His eyes hadn't left her face, studying her with an attention that should have been uncomfortable, but instead felt strangely intoxicating. "And what do you do when you're not providing moral support?" "I'm getting my master's in social work. Glamorous, I know." "Why social work?" The question was unexpected. Most people asked what she planned to do with her degree, not why she'd chosen it. "Because I grew up in foster care," she said simply. "I want to fix a broken system from the inside." Something shifted in his expression, respect perhaps, or recognition. A crusader. A realist with ideals. She sipped her wine, emboldened by his attention and the alcohol warming her blood. "And what do you do, Adrian?" "I solve problems." "That's delightfully vague." "I prefer to maintain an air of mystery." The almost smile again. "Are you hungry?" "I'm sorry?" "There's an excellent Italian restaurant 6 blocks from here. The pasta is handmade, the wine is legitimate, and the art on the walls is honestly mediocre." He tilted his head slightly. "Join me for dinner." It wasn't really a question, but Nora heard herself say yes, anyway. Boston. That first dinner became a second. The second became a third. Within 2 weeks, Adrian had occupied a space in her life she hadn't known was empty. He was unlike anyone she'd ever known, sophisticated without pretension, powerful without arrogance, attentive in a way that made her feel seen for the first time in her life. He asked about her childhood in foster care, her academic work, her dreams for the future, and he listened with genuine interest that seemed impossible for someone of his obvious wealth and status. He never spoke specifically about his work, but he clearly had money, significant money. The restaurants were always exceptional, the gifts thoughtful without being ostentatious, the car service that appeared whenever she needed transportation seamless and professional. But he lived simply, in a renovated brownstone in Brooklyn rather than a Manhattan penthouse, and he wore expensive clothes with the casual indifference of someone who didn't need to prove anything. "What do you actually do?" Nora asked one night over dinner at a quiet French bistro in the West Village. They'd been seeing each other for 3 weeks, and he'd remained maddeningly mysterious about his work. "I told you, I solve problems." "For whom?" "People who need problems solved." His eyes glinted with amusement. "Are you always this persistent? Are you always this evasive?" "Only about things that would bore you." He reached across the table, took her hand in his. "I'm in import-export, logistics, distribution networks, managing territories. It's tedious corporate machinery that doesn't translate well to dinner conversation." It was the most detail he'd ever given, and Nora sensed it was all she would get. She should have pushed harder, demanded transparency, but his thumb was tracing circles on her palm, and his attention was focused entirely on her, and she decided that whatever he did for work didn't matter as much as the way he made her feel when they were together. She was falling in love. No, she'd already fallen. Somewhere between the first dinner and this moment, she'd tumbled completely into something that felt both terrifying and inevitable. "Stay with me tonight," Adrian said when dinner ended. It was the first time he'd asked. They'd shared kisses that left her breathless, but he'd never pressed for more, maintaining a restraint that both frustrated and fascinated her. "Yes," Nora whispered. His apartment, the brownstone in Brooklyn, was masculine and minimalist, all clean lines and expensive simplicity. But it was the view that caught her attention. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline, the city spread out like a promise or a threat. "It's beautiful," she said, standing at the glass. "It's power," Adrian replied, coming to stand behind her. "The illusion of control over something fundamentally chaotic." She turned to face him. "Is that what you want? Control?" "I want you?" His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. "I've wanted you since I saw you in that gallery pretending to understand abstract art." "I wasn't pretending, I genuinely didn't understand it." "I know." He smiled, a real smile this time, open and devastating. "That's why I wanted you." When he kissed her, the city disappeared. Well, the weeks that followed were a blur of intensity. Nights at his apartment, mornings waking up in his bed, evenings that started with dinner and ended with conversations that stretched until dawn. Adrian was brilliant, controlled, and utterly focused on her in a way that felt both exhilarating and slightly overwhelming. He wanted to know everything about her. Her childhood moving between foster homes, the social worker who'd helped her get into college, her determination to become the person she'd needed when she was young and scared and lost in a system that processed children like paperwork. He listened without judgment, asked questions without pity, and made her feel like her past was something powerful rather than something to overcome. "You're extraordinary," he said one night, his fingers trailing down her spine as they lay tangled in his sheets. "You take pain and transform it into purpose. Most people let their damage destroy them." "Is that what you did?" Nora asked. "Transform your damage?" His hand stilled on her back. "My damage is different." "Tell me." "Some other time." He pulled her closer, kissing her shoulder. "Right now, I just want this." She noticed things, though. Small details that didn't quite fit the image of a successful import-export businessman. The phone calls he took in another room, speaking in rapid Italian, or sometimes Russian. The way people deferred to him, not just restaurant staff, but also the drivers, the doormen, the occasional visitor to his apartment who called him Sir, with a reverence that went beyond professional courtesy. The scar on his ribs he dismissed as an old accident, and the fact that he sometimes woke from nightmares he refused to discuss. But love made her willfully blind. She told herself that successful businessmen had demanding jobs, that people with money lived differently, that everyone had secrets and Adrian would share his when he was ready. 2 months into their relationship, he asked her to move in. "It's too fast," Nora protested, though her heart was already saying yes. "Why wait when we both know this is inevitable?" Adrian's hands framed her face. "I want to wake up with you every morning. I want to come home to you. I want you in my space, in my life, permanently." "I barely know you." "You know the parts that matter." His eyes held hers with that intensity that always made her feel simultaneously exposed and protected. "Move in with me, Nora. Let me take care of you." She should have recognized the possessiveness in that request. She should have questioned why a man who'd known her for 8 weeks wanted such complete access to her life. But she was 26 and in love and tired of struggling alone, and Adrian offered security wrapped in devotion. She moved in the following weekend. For a while, it was perfect. Adrian was attentive without being controlling, generous without making her feel bought. He encouraged her to continue her graduate work, hired a car service to take her to campus, and converted a room in his brownstone into an office for her studies. He cooked elaborate meals when his schedule allowed, filled the apartment with flowers he knew she loved, and made love to her with a focus and intensity that left her breathless. But there were cracks in the perfection. Small things, at first. The locked room on the 3rd floor, he told her, was just storage. The way his phone calls stopped abruptly when she entered a room. The night she woke at 3 a.m. to find him dressed and leaving, saying only business when she asked where he was going. The man with cold eyes and scarred knuckles who came to the apartment and spoke to Adrian in hushed tones about territories and problems that needed handling. "What kind of business are you really in?" Nora asked one morning over coffee. Adrian didn't look up from his newspaper. "We've discussed this." "No, you've evaded this." "Import-export of what, exactly?" "Various commodities." He turned the page. "It's complicated and frankly boring." "Try me." He set down the paper, regarding her with those dark eyes that saw too much. "Are you unhappy, Nora?" "I'm curious about the man I live with." "You know everything that matters. I love you. I'm faithful to you. I provide for you. The details of how I earn money are irrelevant to our relationship. Unless those details are dangerous." Something flashed across his face. Anger, perhaps, or warning. "I would never let anything touch you. You're protected." "From what?" "From anything that could hurt you." He stood, came around the table, pulled her to her feet. "Trust me, Nora. That's all I ask. Trust that I'll keep you safe." She wanted to push harder, demand answers, but his arms were around her and his mouth was on hers, and the conversation dissolved into the physical language they spoke fluently. "Trust me," he'd said. So she did. For 3 more months, she trusted. Okay. The night everything shattered started like any other. Adrian was hosting a dinner, business associates, he'd said, asking her to play hostess. Nora had done this before, smiling and serving wine to men in expensive suits who spoke carefully about shipments and territories and distribution networks that she chose not to examine too closely. But this night was different. There were more men than usual, and the atmosphere in the dining room crackled with tension that even her practiced obliviousness couldn't ignore. She served the first course and retreated to the kitchen, giving them privacy for whatever business discussion required this level of security. She'd noticed the additional men stationed outside, the way the usual staff had been dismissed for the evening. She was loading the dishwasher when she heard raised voices from the dining room, not quite shouting, but close. Her hand stilled on a wine glass. "The Ukrainians are expanding into our territory," a voice she didn't recognize said, anger making the words sharp. "If we don't respond, we look weak." "We respond strategically, not emotionally," Adrian's voice cold and controlled. "Escalation serves no one." "With respect, Adrian, your restraint is being interpreted as weakness. The families are talking." "Let them talk," the sound of a glass being set down hard. "I don't make decisions based on optics. We move when I say we move. And if they move first, if they hit one of our operations, then we respond proportionally and we make an example that ends the conversation permanently." Nora's heart stopped. Families. Operations. Respond proportionally. The language of violence wrapped in business terminology. She moved closer to the door, listening. "Morello's right," another voice interjected.
We can't afford a war right now.
Not with the federal investigation heating up. Then we resolved the investigation. Adrian again, utterly calm. We have people in place. It gets shut down quietly, and we continue as planned. And Castellano? A pause. Then, Castellano becomes a lesson about the cost of betrayal. Dead or persuaded? That depends on how much he values his family. Adrian's voice dropped lower, harder. Make it clear, cooperation or consequences. His choice. Nora backed away from the door, her hand pressed to her mouth, the wine glass forgotten. Families. Federal investigations, betrayal and consequences. This wasn't import-export. This wasn't legitimate business with complicated logistics. This was organized crime. Adrian Morello wasn't a businessman. He was a criminal. And not just any criminal. The way these men spoke to him, deferred to him, waited for his decisions. He wasn't a lieutenant or an associate. He was in charge. She made it to the bathroom before she vomited, her whole body shaking as reality crashed through the careful illusions she'd built. Every strange detail, every evasion, every moment she'd chosen not to question suddenly made horrible sense. The money, the power, the deference, the scars, the locked room, the late-night departures. She'd been living with a monster and calling it love. The dinner lasted another hour. Nora heard them leave, heard Adrian speaking to someone in the hallway, heard the front door close. Then footsteps on the stairs. She was sitting on the bathroom floor when he found her, her arms wrapped around her knees, her face wet with tears she hadn't realized she was crying. Nora? He crouched in front of her, concern immediate in his eyes. What's wrong? Are you sick? She looked at him, this man she loved, the stranger she didn't know, and whispered, Who are you? His expression shifted, understanding replacing concern. He was silent for a long moment, then, What did you hear? Enough, her voice broke. You're not an import-export. No. You're... She couldn't even say it. You're a criminal. Yes. The admission, so simple and unashamed, knocked the breath from her lungs. How could you lie to me? I never lied. He sat back on his heels, watching her. I told you I solved problems. That's exactly what I do. You threatened to kill someone tonight. I gave someone a choice. There's a difference. That's not... She pressed her hands to her face. You're not even denying it. You're not even pretending to be something else. Would you prefer I lie to you now? He reached for her hand. She jerked away. Nora, listen to me. Don't touch me. He froze, something flickering across his face that might have been pain. Everything I've felt for you is real. Everything between us is real. How can it be real when I don't even know what you are? You know exactly what I am. His voice hardened slightly. You've always known. You just chose not to see it. The accusation landed like a slap because it was true. She'd had months of evidence, months of strange details and unexplained absences and men who spoke in code. She'd chosen comfort over clarity, love over truth. I can't stay here, she whispered. Nora, I can't. She pushed to her feet, unsteady. I can't sleep next to you knowing that people are hurt because of what you do. People are hurt regardless of what I do. Adrian stood, towering over her in the small bathroom, his presence suddenly oppressive rather than protective. The world isn't the idealistic place you want it to be. There are structures of power and someone controls them. I do it better than most. I do it with more mercy than anyone who would take my place. Mercy? She laughed, the sound breaking. You just threatened someone's family. I gave him a chance to choose cooperation. The alternative was immediate violence. Which would you prefer I do? I'd prefer you not be in a position to make that choice at all. That's not reality. He moved closer. She backed against the sink. This is who I am, Nora. This is what I've always been. But what we have, that's real too. Don't throw it away because you finally see the whole picture. The whole picture is a nightmare. The whole picture is complex. His hand came up, cupped her face despite her earlier rejection. I've protected you from it. You've lived in safety and comfort while I handle the ugliness. Nothing has to change. Everything has changed, she pushed his hand away. I see you now. Then see all of me. His voice dropped, intense and urgent. See the man who loves you, who would burn the world to keep you safe, who has shown you only gentleness and devotion. That's real too, Nora. Don't pretend it isn't. She wanted to believe him. Some broken part of her wanted to accept this, to go back to the beautiful lie where Adrian was mysterious but moral, powerful but protective. But she'd heard him tonight, calm and cold, ordering investigations crushed and people threatened, speaking about violence like it was just another business decision. I need to leave, she said. No. The word was absolute, not a request, not a negotiation, a decision. You can't keep me here against my will. I can keep you safe. His hands gripped her shoulders. You walk out that door, you're vulnerable. You know too much now. You've been seen with me. You've been in my home. You're associated with me. That makes you a target. For whom? For anyone who wants leverage against me. For any of the people who would happily hurt you to hurt me. His grip tightened. You're mine, Nora. That means you're protected, but it also means you can't just leave. The possessiveness she'd once found romantic now sounded like ownership. I'm not yours. I'm a person, not a possession. You're the woman I love. His forehead pressed against hers. Don't do this. Don't walk away from us because you're afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm awake. She pushed against his chest. He didn't budge. Let me go, Adrian. I can't. They stood locked in that moment, his hands on her shoulders, her palms against his chest, both of them breathing hard. The man she loved and the criminal he actually was, overlapping and inseparable. Please, she whispered. Something in her voice broke through. He released her, stepped back, his hands falling to his sides. If you leave, I can't protect you. I'll take my chances. Nora, I'm leaving, tonight. She moved past him, into the bedroom they'd shared for months. She grabbed her overnight bag, started throwing in clothes. Adrian followed, watching from the doorway. You're making a mistake. I made the mistake months ago. She didn't look at him, couldn't bear to see his face. I should have asked questions. I should have demanded answers. I should have trusted my instincts instead of your words. My words were true. I love you. You don't love me, you own me. She zipped the bag, turned to face him. There's a difference. Where will you go? Anywhere that isn't here. I'll find you. It wasn't a threat, just a statement of fact. She believed him absolutely. Then I'll run faster. She moved toward the door. He blocked her path. Nora, please. Think about this. You're upset. You're emotional. I'm clear-headed for the first time in months. She looked up at him, this beautiful, dangerous man who'd become her whole world. Move. For a long moment, he didn't. She could see him calculating, weighing options, considering whether to simply refuse, to lock her in, to use the power he clearly had to keep her exactly where he wanted her. Then he stepped aside. She walked past him, down the stairs, through the apartment that had been her home, out the front door into the November night. She didn't look back. She stayed with Claire for a week, then moved to a different friend's couch, then to a cheap hotel in Queens. She changed her phone number, deactivated her social media, told her graduate program she was taking a leave of absence for personal reasons. She tried to disappear into the vast anonymity of New York City. Adrian found her anyway. The first message came to her new phone number. How he got it, she had no idea. We need to talk, please. She deleted it. The second came via an email account she'd never given him. I understand you're angry, but running won't keep you safe. Let me protect you. She deleted that too. The third came as flowers delivered to the school administration office, where she'd picked up paperwork for her leave of absence. The card read simply, You can't hide from me, but you also don't need to fear me. A. That night, she bought a pregnancy test. She'd missed her period. In the chaos of leaving, of running, of reconstructing her life, she'd barely noticed. But now, standing in a drugstore bathroom at midnight, she stared at 2 pink lines and felt her entire world shift again. She was pregnant, with Adrian Morello's child, the man she'd fled, the criminal she'd loved, the father of the baby growing inside her. She had 2 options: tell him or run so far he'd never find her. The next morning, she withdrew what little money she had, bought a bus ticket to somewhere she'd never been, and disappeared. Present day.
Mila stirred in her crib, making small sounds that meant she'd wake soon, demanding food and attention and all the love Nora had to give. Nora crossed to her, lifted the baby into her arms, breathed in that sweet infant smell that made everything else fade. "I've kept you safe," she whispered against the downy head. "He doesn't know about you. He'll never know. We're invisible, and we're staying that way." But even as she said it, something cold slid down her spine.
Adrian Morello had found her 3 times before. He'd tracked her through new phone numbers and deleted accounts and anonymous addresses. He'd sent flowers to places he shouldn't have known she'd be. Men like Adrian didn't stop looking for what they considered theirs. And she'd taken something far more valuable than just herself. She'd taken his child. The knock on the door came at exactly 8:43 p.m., shattering the evening routine of bath and bottle and lullabies. Nora froze, Mila halfway into her pajamas on the changing table. Nobody knocked at this hour. Mrs. Chen was at home. The landlord had no reason to visit. The few acquaintances she'd made in Millbrook knew better than to drop by unannounced. The knock came again. Patient, insistent, inevitable. Nora's hands shook as she finished dressing her daughter. She settled Mila in the crib, whispered, "Stay quiet, baby. Please stay quiet," and moved to the door. "Who is it?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "You know who it is." The voice, smooth, textured, achingly familiar, sent ice through her veins. Adrian. 6 months of hiding, 6 months of careful invisibility, 6 months of believing she'd actually escaped. All of it meaningless. He'd found her. Nora's hand trembled on the doorknob. Every instinct screamed at her to run, grab Mila, climb out the window, disappear into the night. But Adrian's voice on the other side of that thin door told her what she'd always known deep down. Running was over. "Nora." His voice came again, patient but firm. "Open the door. We both know I can get through it if I need to, but I'd rather not frighten the neighbors." The threat wrapped in civility was so perfectly Adrian that it made her chest ache. She looked back at Mila, who watched her with those devastating dark eyes, her father's eyes, and made a decision that had nothing to do with what she wanted and everything to do with keeping her daughter safe. She opened the door. Adrian stood in the hallway, looking exactly as she remembered and somehow different. Still devastatingly handsome in that brutal, elegant way. Sharp suit, dark hair perfectly styled, those penetrating eyes that saw straight through pretense. But there was something harder in his face now, something weathered. 6 months of searching had left their mark. His gaze swept over her in one comprehensive assessment, cataloging changes, confirming her identity, checking for threats. Then his eyes moved past her into the apartment and stopped on the crib. The world seemed to hold its breath. Adrian's expression didn't change, but Nora saw the moment understanding crash through him. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His hands, which had been relaxed at his sides, curled into fists and then deliberately uncurled. When he looked back at her, something terrible and beautiful burned in his eyes. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "There's nothing to talk about." Nora positioned herself between him and the crib, her body a shield even though she knew it was useless. "You need to leave." "I'm not leaving." He took a step forward. She held her ground. "How old?" "That's none of your business." "Nora." Her name was a warning. "How old is my daughter?" "She's not—" But the lie died on her tongue. Mila had his eyes, his dark coloring, his bone structure already visible in her infant features. Denying paternity would be pointless. 5 months. She watched him calculate backward, watched him realize she'd been pregnant when she left, watched fury and something that might have been pain flash across his face before he controlled it. 5 months, he repeated softly. "And you were going to what? Hide her from me forever?" "Yes." The admission came out defiant. "I was going to keep her safe from your world." "My world." His laugh was bitter. "You mean the world that kept you safe for months? The world that gave you everything you needed while you played at having a normal life? The world where people get threatened and hurt and killed." Nora's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. "Where children grow up learning that violence is just business. Where our daughter would be protected by more power than you could ever give her on your own." Adrian moved closer, his presence filling the small apartment. "Where she would want for nothing, fear nothing, because she'd be mine." "She's not a possession?" "No."
She's my child, my blood, my responsibility. His eyes burned into hers. And you stole her from me. The accusation landed like a physical blow. I saved her from you. You ran like a coward and hid my daughter in a dying town where you're barely surviving on waitress wages. He gestured at the threadbare furniture, the peeling paint, the general poverty of their existence. This is what you call saving her? Shame and anger warred in Nora's chest. She's loved. She's safe. That's more than she'd have with you. Safe? Adrian's voice dropped to something dangerous.
You think you're safe here? You think a locked door and a fire escape make you invisible? Nora, I've known where you were for 3 weeks. I've had men watching this building, tracking your movements, making sure no one else found you first. The blood drained from her face. You've been watching us? I've been protecting you, as I've always protected you. He ran a hand through his hair, the first sign of agitation breaking through his controlled exterior. Do you have any idea what could have happened if someone else had found you first? If one of my enemies had realized the woman I tore apart half the eastern seaboard searching for was hiding in Millbrook with my child? No one knew. Everyone knew I was looking for you. Everyone saw me lose control for the first time in my career, saw me neglect business and territories and alliances because I was obsessed with finding one woman who ran from me. His hands gripped her arms, not hard but firm, holding her in place. You made me weak, Nora, and in my world, weakness gets people killed. Then maybe you should have let me go. I can't. The words were raw, stripped of artifice. I tried. For 2 months after you left, I tried to let you disappear. I told myself you were safer away from me, that you'd made your choice, that I should respect it. But I couldn't stop looking. I couldn't stop needing to know you were alive and safe, and he stopped, his jaw working. And then I found you were pregnant, and letting you go stopped being an option. How did you? But Nora knew. He had resources she couldn't imagine, connections that reached into every corner of society. Finding medical records or pharmacy purchases or any of the dozens of traces a pregnant woman left behind would have been easy for someone with his power. Behind them, Mila made a small sound. Not quite crying, but the precursor to it. Both of them froze. I need to feed her, Nora said quietly. Adrian released her arms, stepped back. Then feed her. She moved to the crib, lifted Mila into her arms, aware of Adrian's eyes on them both. The baby fussed, her small face scrunching in pre-cry distress. Nora settled into the armchair, pulled a bottle from the small cooler she kept beside it, and offered it to her daughter. Mila latched on immediately, her dark eyes, Adrian's eyes, fixed on Nora's face with that intense infant focus that always made her heart melt. Adrian watched from across the room, absolutely still. Nora could see him taking in every detail, the way Mila's hand curled around the bottle, the soft sucking sounds she made, the downy dark hair that would probably curl like his when it grew longer. His daughter, the child he'd never known existed until 10 minutes ago. What's her name? He asked, his voice rough. Nora hesitated. Giving him this felt like giving him claim, making this real in a way she'd avoided for months. But he'd found them. He knew. Refusing to answer would change nothing. Mila, she said softly. Mila Rose Blake. Blake. His mouth tightened. Not Morello. She's my daughter. She's our daughter. He crossed the room, crouched beside the armchair so he was eye level with the baby. Hello, Mila. The baby's eyes shifted to him, curious and unafraid. She kept drinking, but her gaze tracked his face with that eerie infant ability to stare without self-consciousness. Nora watched something crack in Adrian's expression, a softening she'd rarely seen, a vulnerability that looked wrong on a man who controlled organized crime with calculated brutality. His hand lifted, hesitated, then gently touched Mila's cheek with one finger. She has your nose, he said, still looking at the baby, and my complete lack of subtlety when she wants something. Despite everything, despite the fear and anger and desperate situation, Nora almost smiled. She's persistent and loud when she's unhappy. Definitely mine then. He looked up at Nora and the expression in his eyes made her breath catch. I've missed 5 months of her life. I'm sorry. The apology slipped out before she could stop it, and she hated that some part of her meant it. Whatever Adrian was, However dangerous and morally compromised, he was Mila's father, and she'd stolen that from him. You're sorry. He stood abruptly, the softness evaporating. You're sorry you deprived me of watching my daughter grow inside you, of being there when she was born, of holding her as a newborn, of hearing her first sounds, of... He stopped, visibly controlling himself. Sorry doesn't begin to cover what you've taken from me. What about what you took from me? Nora's own anger flared back to life. You lied about who you were. You built our entire relationship on deception. You made me love a person who didn't exist. I never lied to you. You let me believe you were legitimate. You believed what you wanted to believe. His voice was hard now, the tenderness from moments ago completely gone. I told you I solved problems. I told you my business was complicated. I showed you exactly who I was in 100 different ways, and you chose to ignore all of it because you preferred the fantasy. The accusation stung because it was true. She had ignored the signs, had deliberately blinded herself to evidence that didn't fit the love story she wanted to live. Maybe I did, she said quietly, but I woke up. And when I did, I chose to protect our daughter from a world where people threaten families and buy off federal investigations and talk about making examples of betrayal. That world is the reason you're still alive. Adrian moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the small space. Do you think I let you walk out that night because I respected your choice? I let you go because forcing you to stay would have broken something between us I wanted to preserve. But I never stopped watching. I never stopped protecting you. I didn't ask for your protection. You got it anyway. The men who followed you weren't tracking you for me. They were keeping everyone else away from you. The landlord who rented you this apartment despite your lack of references and credit history? I ensured he'd say yes. The job at the diner that paid under the table and asked no questions? I made that happen. His eyes bored into hers. You've been living under my protection for 6 months, Nora. The only difference is you didn't know it. The revelation hit like a slap. Every piece of freedom she'd carved out, every small victory of her independent life, had been facilitated by Adrian's invisible hand. She hadn't escaped at all. She'd been allowed to play at escape while he controlled the game board. You had no right, she whispered. I had every right. You're mine, and so is she. He gestured at Mila, who'd finished her bottle and was starting to drift toward sleep against Nora's shoulder. And now we're done with this performance of independence. You're coming home. This is home. This is a cage you built for yourself. Adrian pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. I have a car waiting downstairs. You have 10 minutes to pack whatever matters. Everything else will be replaced. I'm not going anywhere with you. Yes, you are. Tu. He said it with such absolute certainty that it felt like fact rather than demand. Because if you don't, I'll make calls that will have Child Protective Services here within the hour with concerns about a single mother living in poverty with an infant. I'll ensure you're investigated, questioned, possibly separated from Mila while they determine if you're fit. Horror flooded through her. You wouldn't. I would do anything to get my daughter somewhere safe. His expression was implacable. Your choices are come willingly and retain some autonomy or fight me and lose everything. Choose. Nora looked down at Mila, now sleeping peacefully against her chest, blissfully unaware that her entire world was being dismantled. Every maternal instinct screamed at her to run, to fight, to protect. But Adrian wasn't bluffing. He had the resources to do exactly what he threatened, and fighting him would only hurt Mila in the end. She'd lost. Maybe she'd lost the moment she fell in love with him, or the moment she got pregnant, or the moment she opened the door tonight. The timeline didn't matter. The result was the same. If I come, she said carefully, I want your word that Mila stays with me, that she's not taken from me or given to someone else to raise. She's my daughter. Of course she stays with you. And you won't... She swallowed hard. You won't expose her to violence, to the dangerous parts of your business. She'll be protected from everything that could hurt her, including the consequences of her mother's choices. He softened slightly, sensing victory. I'm not a monster, Nora. I want what's best for our daughter. What's best for her is not growing up in your world. What's best for her is growing up with both her parents, with every advantage my resources can provide, protected by power you can't comprehend. He glanced at his watch. 8 minutes.
Nora knew when she was beaten. She stood carefully, Mila still sleeping against her shoulder, and looked around the tiny apartment that had been their sanctuary for 6 months. Such a small space to contain all her hopes for a different life. "I'll need help packing," she said quietly, accepting the inevitable. Adrian made a gesture, and 2 men appeared in the doorway. Professional, armed, clearly his security. They entered the apartment with the efficiency of people who'd done this before, quickly and quietly packing Nora's meager belongings while she stood holding her daughter and watching her independence disappear into cardboard boxes. It took less than the allotted 10 minutes. She didn't have enough possessions to require more time. "Ready?" Adrian asked, his hand settling on the small of her back. Proprietary, possessive, final. "Do I have a choice?" "You always have choices, Nora. You're just learning that all of them have consequences." He guided her toward the door, his security carrying her packed boxes. "The car's waiting." The vehicle was exactly what she expected. Black, expensive, windows tinted past legal limits. Adrian helped her into the back seat, took Mila from her arms with surprising gentleness while she buckled in, then handed the baby back before sliding in beside her. The door closed. The locks engaged with a definitive click. Nora watched through the window as Millbrook disappeared behind them, the diner where she'd worked, the hardware store that had been their home, the small-town anonymity that had been her shield, all of it gone, slipping away into the night as Adrian's driver navigated toward a future she didn't want but couldn't escape. "Where are we going?" she asked quietly. "My estate. About 2 hours north." Adrian was typing on his phone, presumably making arrangements. "It's secure, private, everything you'll need." "A prison, you mean?" "A home." He looked up from his phone, his eyes finding hers in the darkness of the car's interior. "I understand you're angry. I understand you feel trapped, but this is where you were always going to end up, Nora. The only question was whether you'd come willingly or fighting. And which am I doing now? You're surviving, making the smart choice to protect our daughter." His hand found hers in the darkness between them. That's what good mothers do. She wanted to pull away, but his grip was firm and his words struck something deep. She was protecting Mila. That was all that mattered. The drive passed in tense silence. Mila woke once, fussed briefly, then settled back to sleep. Adrian watched his daughter with an attention that bordered on obsession, cataloging every movement, every sound, every expression that crossed her small face. "She's beautiful," he said softly. Yes, that was something they could agree on. She deserves everything. She deserves a normal life. Normal is overrated. His thumb traced circles on the back of Nora's hand. She deserves to be extraordinary, to have power and protection and possibilities most people never imagine. She deserves to be safe. She will be. I promise you that. He lifted Nora's hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. "Whatever else you believe about me, believe that I will protect our daughter with everything I have." Nora wanted to argue, to fight, to reject every word, but the truth was, she did believe him. Adrian was many things, criminal, dangerous, morally compromised, but he was also capable of fierce, protective devotion. She'd seen it directed at her. Now it would extend to Mila. Whether that was comfort or threat, she couldn't decide. The estate appeared after they turned off the highway onto a private road that wound through dense forest for 20 minutes. Gates opened automatically as they approached. Tall, iron, imposing. The car passed through, and Nora caught sight of security cameras, motion sensors, armed guards stationed at intervals along the perimeter. This wasn't a home. It was a fortress. The main house emerged from the trees like something from a magazine. Modern architecture blended with classical elements, all glass and stone in expensive taste. Lights blazed from every window, making it glow against the dark forest like a beacon or a warning. "Welcome home," Adrian said as the car stopped at the front entrance. Nora didn't respond. She was too busy cataloging exit routes, security measures, possible ways to escape with a 5-month-old baby from a place designed to keep people in or out as needed. Adrian seemed to read her thoughts. "Don't," he said quietly. "Don't waste energy planning impossible escapes. You're here now. Make peace with it." "I'll never make peace with being a prisoner." "Then learn to be a willing participant." He opened the car door, offered his hand. "It's much more pleasant that way."
She ignored his hand, climbed out on her own with Mila in her arms. The night air was crisp and clean, untainted by the diesel and desperation that had characterized Millbrook. Stars visible overhead, space and silence and wealth surrounding them. Beautiful. Terrible. Inescapable. The front door opened, and a woman appeared, early 50s, professionally dressed, with kind eyes and an efficient manner that spoke of years managing complicated households. "Mr. Morello," she said with a slight nod, "everything is ready as you requested." "Thank you, Maria." Adrian's hand settled on Nora's back again, guiding her forward. "This is Nora Blake and my daughter Mila. They'll be living here permanently. Please ensure they have everything they need." Maria's eyes widened slightly at the word daughter, but she recovered quickly. "Of course. I've prepared the East Wing as you specified." "The nursery?" "Fully equipped. I took the liberty of ordering essentials based on the baby's age." "Excellent." Adrian guided Nora through the door, into a foyer that was all marble and modern art and intimidating wealth. "Maria manages the household. Anything you need, ask her." Nora felt overwhelmed by the space, the luxury, the sheer magnitude of Adrian's world made concrete. This was what she'd fled from, not just the violence, but the suffocating excess of it all. "I'd like to see where Mila will sleep," she said, finding her voice. "This way." Adrian led her through the house, past a formal living room, a library with floor-to-ceiling books, a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a restaurant, up a sweeping staircase to the second floor, down a hallway lined with original art worth more than Nora would earn in a lifetime. The nursery made her breath catch. It was perfect. Not ostentatious or overdone, but thoughtfully designed with soft colors and quality furniture and everything a baby could need. A crib that was both beautiful and safe, a changing table, a rocking chair positioned near windows that overlooked the forest, shelves already stocked with books and toys. "When did you—" She stopped, understanding. "You've been planning this." "Since I found you 3 weeks ago." Adrian set down the diaper bag one of his men had carried up. "I knew I'd bring you home eventually. I wanted everything ready." Nora moved to the crib, gently laid Mila down on the mattress. The baby stirred but didn't wake, comfortable and safe despite the dramatic upheaval of her young life. "Your room is connected through there," Adrian indicated a door. "So you can hear her at night." She walked through into a bedroom that was simultaneously luxurious and intimate. King bed with expensive linens, sitting area, ensuite bathroom visible through another doorway. Her pathetic boxes from the apartment sat stacked in the corner, looking ashamed of their poverty amid such wealth. "I can't stay in here with you," she said. "I'm not in here. My room is down the hall." Adrian leaned against the doorframe, watching her. "You'll have your space, Nora. I'm not trying to force intimacy you don't want." The concession surprised her. "Then what are you trying to force?" "Proximity, safety, a life for our daughter that includes both her parents." He crossed his arms. "What happens between us beyond that is your choice." "My choice?" She laughed bitterly. "When have I had a choice in any of this?" "You chose to open the door tonight instead of running. You chose to get in the car. You chose to protect Mila over fighting me." His eyes held hers. "Every step of the way, you've made choices. You just don't like the options you're choosing between." "That's not the same as real choice." "No, but it's what we have." He straightened from the doorframe. "Get some rest. We'll talk more tomorrow." "Adrian?" She stopped him before he could leave. "What happens now?" "Now?" He considered the question. "Now you adjust to being home. You take care of our daughter. You accept that this is where you belong. And if I can't accept it," something dangerous flickered across his face, "then I'll help you accept it. Whatever that takes." He softened slightly. "But I'd prefer you come to it on your own, for Mila's sake, if not for ours." He left, closing the door behind him with a quiet click that sounded somehow more final than a slam. Nora stood in the center of the beautiful room, surrounded by wealth she'd never wanted and trapped in a life she'd tried desperately to escape. Through the open door to the nursery, she could see Mila sleeping peacefully, unaware that her mother's choices had led them here. She'd run to protect her daughter. Instead, she delivered them both directly into Adrian's control. The only question now was whether she'd find a way to survive it, or if loving Adrian Morello would destroy her completely. Nora didn't sleep that night. She lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to Mila's soft breathing through the open door, and tried to make sense of the disaster her life had become. Every creak of the house made her tense. Every shadow felt like a threat. And the silence, so different from the ambient noise of Millbrook, pressed against her like something physical. Around 3 a.m., Mila woke crying. Nora was on her feet instantly, crossing into the nursery before the baby's distress could escalate. She lifted her daughter, felt the familiar weight settle against her chest, and began the practiced routine of checking diaper, offering bottle, rocking gently until the crying subsided. "Shh, baby girl," she whispered, settling into the rocking chair. "I know, everything's different and strange, but I'm still here, I'm always here." Mila latched onto the bottle, her dark eyes, Adrian's eyes, fixed on Nora's face with that unwavering infant focus. In moments like this, exhausted and alone in the darkness, Nora could almost pretend they were still in their small apartment, still safe in their invisibility. But the expensive furniture, the forest visible through floor-to-ceiling windows, the sheer quality of everything surrounding them made pretending impossible. "Your father found us," she told the baby softly. "And I don't know how to protect you from him when he controls everything." Mila's hand curled around Nora's finger, gripping with surprising strength. "But I'll figure it out, I promise." "She has your determination." Nora's head snapped up. Adrian stood in the doorway connecting the nursery to the hall, wearing sleep pants and nothing else. His hair mussed, and his expression softer than she'd seen it since he'd appeared at her apartment door. He looked almost human like this, almost like the man she'd fallen in love with before she knew what he really was. "How long have you been standing there?" she asked. "Long enough." He moved into the room, his bare feet silent on the plush carpet. "I heard her crying. I was coming to check when I heard you talking to her. You should have announced yourself." "Would you have kept talking if I had?" He settled onto the ottoman near the rocking chair, close enough to see Mila, but not so close that Nora felt crowded. "She's beautiful when she eats, content, focused. She's beautiful always." The words came out more defensive than Nora intended. "Yes." Adrian's gaze moved from the baby to Nora. "You look exhausted." "I couldn't sleep." "Because you're planning your escape?" The accuracy of his observation made her jaw tighten. "Because everything familiar is gone, and I'm trapped in a stranger's house with my daughter." "I'm not a stranger, Nora. I'm the man who knows exactly how you take your coffee, what book you read when you're stressed, the sound you make when you're falling asleep." His voice was quiet, intimate in the darkness. "The fact that you ran doesn't erase what we were to each other. What we were was based on lies. What we were was real. The context was just incomplete." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I never lied about my feelings, about wanting you, needing you, loving you. That was always true." "Love doesn't look like this." She gestured at the nursery, the house, the invisible bars of her golden cage. "Love doesn't trap people. Love does whatever it takes to protect what matters." His eyes held hers. "Would you have come willingly if I'd asked?" "No." "Then I did what was necessary." He reached out, his fingers gentle on Mila's downy head. "I'm not going to apologize for bringing my daughter somewhere safe." Nora wanted to argue, but Mila had finished her bottle and was already drifting back to sleep, her small body relaxed and trusting. She stood carefully, moved to the crib, and laid the baby down with practiced ease. Adrian watched every movement, learning, cataloging. "Show me how to do that," he said quietly. "What?" "How to put her down without waking her. How to know if she's really asleep or just resting." He stood, moved to stand beside her at the crib. "I've missed 5 months. I need to learn everything." The request was so unexpected, so genuinely vulnerable, that Nora felt something in her chest crack slightly. Whatever else Adrian was, criminal, captor, threat, he was also a father meeting his daughter for the first time, a man who'd been robbed of something precious. "She likes to be on her back," Nora said quietly, demonstrating. One hand supporting her head, the other under her bottom. "You lower her slowly, let her settle on the mattress, then slide your hands out from under her." She performed the motion as she spoke. "If she stirs, you put your hand on her chest, gentle pressure, Just enough that she knows you're there. Usually she'll settle. Adrian watched intently, and Nora could see him committing every detail to memory with the same focus he probably applied to business negotiations and territorial disputes. "Can I try?" he asked. "Next time she wakes." The question was so careful, so aware that he was asking permission rather than simply taking what he wanted, that Nora found herself nodding before she fully processed the decision. "Next time," she agreed. They stood there in the dim nursery, watching Mila sleep, and for a moment the hostility between them softened into something more complicated. Two parents, whatever their history, connected by the tiny human they'd created. "I really am sorry," Adrian said quietly, "for how this happened, for the fear I've put you through, for making you feel trapped." He paused. "But I'm not sorry you're here. I'm not sorry I found you." "I know." And she did. Adrian's remorse was genuine, but it would never be enough to make him change course. He'd chosen this path, and he'd walk it regardless of her feelings because in his world, protection trumped autonomy every time. "You should try to sleep," he said. "Maria has staff who can watch Mila in the morning if you want to rest." "I'm not leaving her with strangers." "They're not strangers. They're vetted, trained, and they've worked for me for years." His hand settled on her shoulder. "But I understand. Take whatever time you need to trust them." He left then, disappearing back through the hallway door, leaving Nora alone with the sleeping baby and her tangled thoughts. She returned to her room, but still couldn't sleep. Instead, she stood at the window watching the sky lighten gradually over the forest, wondering if there was any way out of this that didn't end in complete destruction. Morning came with soft, golden light filtering through the trees, and Maria knocking quietly on her door with a breakfast tray. Fresh fruit, yogurt, coffee, prepared exactly how Nora liked it, even though she'd never told anyone in this house her preferences. Adrian had known. Of course he had. "Mister, Morello thought you might prefer eating in your room this morning," Maria said, setting the tray on the small table near the windows. "But he'd like to see you in his office at 10 if you're available." Available? As if Nora had any choice in the matter. "Where's his office?" she asked. "First floor, west wing. I can show you when you're ready." Maria glanced toward the nursery. "I also prepared some things for the baby. Fresh clothes, diapers, formula. Everything's in the dresser." "Thank you." The words felt automatic, hollow. Maria was kind, but she worked for Adrian. Everything here was an extension of his control. After Maria left, Nora fed Mila, changed her into one of the impossibly soft outfits that had appeared in the nursery dresser, and tried to prepare herself for whatever confrontation awaited in Adrian's office. At 9:55, she found her way downstairs with Mila on her hip. The house was even more impressive in daylight. Art she recognized from museums, furniture that belonged in design magazines, space and light, and wealth that felt almost obscene. Maria appeared from somewhere, guided her through hallways to a set of double doors, knocked once, then opened them when Adrian's voice called out permission. The office was masculine and sophisticated. Dark wood, leather chairs, bookshelves lined with what looked like actual books, rather than decorative props. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked manicured gardens and forest beyond. Adrian sat behind a massive desk, typing on a laptop, but he looked up immediately when they entered. "Thank you, Maria." He stood as the housekeeper withdrew, his attention shifting entirely to Nora and the baby. "How did she sleep after I left?" "Fine. She woke once more around 5, but settled quickly." Nora shifted Mila to her other hip, uncomfortable under his scrutiny. "And you? Did you sleep at all?" "Enough." "Liar." But his tone was almost affectionate. "Sit, please." She settled into one of the leather chairs facing his desk, arranging Mila on her lap. The baby was awake and alert, looking around the unfamiliar space with wide, curious eyes. Adrian came around the desk, crouched in front of them so he was eye level with his daughter. "Hello, Mila." His voice softened in a way Nora had rarely heard. "May I hold you?" The question was directed at Nora. She hesitated, every protective instinct screaming against handing over her child. But refusing would only delay the inevitable, and some small part of her recognized that Adrian deserved this. "Support her head," she said quietly, demonstrating. "She's getting better at holding it up, but she still needs help." Adrian's hands were careful, almost reverent,
as he lifted Mila from Nora's lap. The baby looked surprised for a moment, studying this new person with serious dark eyes, then seemed to decide he was acceptable. She didn't cry or fuss, just watched him with that unblinking infant stare. "She's so small," Adrian murmured, one large hand cradling Mila's head. "And perfect." Watching them together made Nora's chest ache. Father and daughter meeting for the first time in the baby's memory, and the resemblance was striking. Same dark eyes, same intensity of focus, same way of looking at the world like they were cataloging threats and advantages. "She's 5 months old," Nora said. "She should be sitting up on her own soon, starting solid foods, learning to recognize patterns and faces." "Tell me everything." Adrian moved to sit in the chair beside Nora's, still holding Mila carefully. "What she likes, what she doesn't. What makes her laugh. All of it." So Nora did. She told him about Mila's preference for being held on the left side, her fascination with ceiling fans, the way she got hiccups after eating too fast. She explained the baby's schedule, her developing personality, the small milestones she'd reached. And Adrian listened like she was revealing state secrets, absorbing every detail about the daughter he'd never known existed. "She's lucky to have you as a mother," he said, when Nora's catalog of information finally ran dry. "Whatever else has happened, you've taken excellent care of her. She's my whole world." "I know." His eyes met hers over Mila's head. "And now she's mine too, which is why we need to discuss the future." Nora's guard went back up immediately. "What about it?" "Logistically, we have things to address. Mila needs to be registered properly. Birth certificate with both parents listed, social security number, health insurance. You need documentation as well, things that establish you're living here legally and voluntarily. Except I'm not here voluntarily. You're here because it's the safest place for our daughter. The voluntary part is your choice." He shifted Mila slightly as she began to fuss. "I'm not going to lie to you, Nora. My world is dangerous. The people I deal with are ruthless, and the business I conduct requires hard decisions. But I'm also one of the most powerful men in the region, which means I can protect what's mine better than anyone else could. We're not possessions. No, you're family, which means you get the full weight of my protection and my resources." His jaw tightened slightly. "But it also means you can't just leave. Not because I'm keeping you prisoner, but because walking away makes you both vulnerable to everyone who'd use you against me." "Then maybe you should let us go somewhere so far away no one would find us." "There's nowhere that far." His voice was flat, final. "I've spent 6 months proving that. I found you in a town that doesn't appear on most maps, living under the radar, trying to be invisible. If I can find you, anyone with resources and motivation can. Your safety isn't in hiding. It's in being so completely under my protection that hurting you would be suicidal." The logic was sound, which made it more infuriating. Nora wanted to argue, but she couldn't deny that Adrian had found her easily, that her attempt at invisibility had been pathetically inadequate against someone with real power and reach. "So what are you proposing?" she asked. "That I just accept this? Live here like some kept woman while you run your criminal empire?" "I'm proposing we build a life together, for Mila's sake if nothing else." He stood, walked to the windows with the baby, gently bouncing her the way Nora had shown him. "I'm not asking you to love me again. I'm not even asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to be a parent with me, to give our daughter the stability of two people who put her needs first." "And what about my needs? What do you need?" He turned to face her. "Purpose? You can continue your graduate work, finish your degree remotely. I'll arrange everything. Independence? You'll have your own space, your own schedule, freedom to move around the estate and grounds. A future? Mila will have every advantage, every opportunity, every door open before she's old enough to ask. I need freedom, real freedom. That's the one thing I can't give you." His expression was almost apologetic. "Not because I want to control you, but because letting you leave would be letting you die. Someone would find you, someone would use you, and I'd spend the rest of my life knowing I failed to protect the two people who matter most." Mila began to cry. A real cry this time, not just fussing. Adrian looked momentarily panicked, and despite everything, Nora almost smiled. "She's hungry," she said, standing. "It's been 3 hours since she ate." "Show me how to feed her." He carried the baby to Nora. "Please." They settled on the leather couch in the corner of the office, Nora preparing the bottle while Adrian held Mila with increasing confidence. She handed him the bottle, positioned his hands correctly, and watched as he offered it to their daughter. Mila latched on immediately, her crying stopping as suddenly as it started. Adrian's expression transformed, wonder mixing with something fierce and protective that Nora recognized because she felt it every time she looked at their child. "This is everything," he said quietly, watching Mila eat. "Nothing else I've built, nothing else I've achieved, none of it matters compared to this." "Then walk away from it." The words burst out before Nora could stop them. "If she matters so much, leave the criminal world. Be legitimate. Be safe." "It's not that simple." It could be if you wanted it to be." "No." He looked up at her, and the sadness in his eyes was genuine. "I'm not a good man, Nora. I've done things that would horrify you, made choices that can't be unmade. But I'm better than the people who'd take my place if I walked away. I use my power to minimize violence, to create order, to protect the vulnerable from worse predators. If I leave, the vacuum I create would be filled by someone with none of my restraint. That's an excuse to justify what you do. It's reality." His attention returned to Mila. "But I can change how I do it. I can be more selective, more careful, more focused on legitimate enterprises over time. I can build something better for her future." "Can you?" Nora heard the hope in her own voice and hated it. "Or will you just keep telling yourself you will while nothing actually changes?" "I don't know." The honesty surprised her. "But I'm willing to try. For her, for you, for the chance at something better than what I've had." Mila finished eating, and Adrian handed her back to Nora with obvious reluctance. "I have meetings this afternoon," he said. "Business I can't avoid. But tonight, I'd like to have dinner with you, both of you. Just us, in the private dining room." "Is that a request or an order?" "It's a hope." He stood, moved back toward his desk. 7 o'clock. Maria will show you where." Nora left the office with Mila, her mind spinning. Adrian's words, his promises of change, his obvious devotion to their daughter, all of it complicated the simple narrative she'd been clinging to. He wasn't just a monster keeping her captive. He was also Mila's father, genuinely trying to figure out how to be what his daughter needed. But trying wasn't the same as succeeding, and promises of change meant nothing without action. The rest of the day passed in a strange, suspended normalcy. Nora explored the house with Mila, discovering a gym, a library that took her breath away, a conservatory filled with plants and light. Maria appeared periodically with offers of help that Nora mostly declined, not ready to trust staff who ultimately answered to Adrian. At 6:30, she changed into one of the dresses that had appeared in her closet. Simple, elegant, expensive in a way that made her uncomfortable. She dressed Mila in a soft cotton outfit, brushed her own hair until it shone, and tried to prepare herself for an evening of pretending this was normal. The private dining room was smaller than she expected, intimate rather than formal. Windows overlooked the gardens, now lit with subtle landscape lighting that made the space feel almost magical. A table set for two, candles already burning, music playing softly from hidden speakers. Adrian was already there, having changed from his earlier business attire into dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked up when she entered, and something heated flashed in his eyes before he controlled it. "You look beautiful," he said. "Don't." The word came out sharper than intended. "Don't pretend this is a date. Don't try to seduce me into accepting this. I'm not pretending anything. You're beautiful, that's just fact." He moved to pull out her chair. "But I understand this isn't romantic. It's two parents having dinner while their daughter sleeps nearby." Maria had set up a portable bassinet in the corner, and Nora settled Mila into it before sitting down. The baby was drowsy from a recent feeding, already drifting towards sleep. Dinner was excellent, of course it was. Adrian had staff who could prepare anything, access to ingredients most people never encountered. The food was exquisite, the wine perfectly paired, the entire experience designed to seduce through comfort and luxury. "Tell me about Millbrook," Adrian said as they ate. "What was your life like there?" "Small, quiet, invisible." Nora sipped her wine. "Everything I needed it to be." "Were you happy?" The question caught her off guard. "I was safe, or I thought I was." "That's not the same as happy." "No." She set down her fork.
I was lonely, scared all the time, working a job I hated for barely enough money to survive. But Mila was safe, and that was all that mattered. She would have been safer here. With you? A man who orders people threatened? Who runs criminal enterprises? Who lives in a world where violence is just business? Nora's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. How is that safer? Because no one touches what's mine, ever. The absolute certainty in his voice was chilling. In Millbrook, you were vulnerable. Anyone could have hurt you. Here, you're protected by power most people can't comprehend. There's a difference. There's also a price. Yes, the price is proximity to me, to my world. He leaned back in his chair. But that price comes with benefits you haven't acknowledged. Mila will never want for anything. She'll have the best education, the best health care, every opportunity. And you could finish your degree, pursue your passion for social work, maybe even use my resources to actually help people instead of just studying systems that fail them. The offer was tempting, and that made it dangerous. Nora had spent years preparing for a career helping vulnerable children, and the idea of having unlimited resources to actually make a difference was seductive in a way that had nothing to do with Adrian himself. And in exchange, she asked, what would you want from me? Your presence, your partnership in raising Mila. Eventually, if you're willing, your trust. His eyes held hers across the candlelight. I'm not asking you to love me again, Nora. I'm asking you to build something with me, something better than either of us would have alone. You already built something, a criminal empire. I'm building an empire, yes, but what it is, criminal or legitimate, that can change over time. He paused. Especially if I have the reason to change it. Don't put that on me. Don't make me responsible for your choices. I'm not. My choices are my own. But having you here, having Mila, it makes me want things I stopped believing in years ago. Safety through legitimacy instead of fear. A future that doesn't end in violence or prison. His jaw tightened. A chance to be someone my daughter won't be ashamed of. The vulnerability in that admission made Nora's throat tight. This was the Adrian she'd fallen in love with. The man underneath the criminal, showing her pieces of himself he hid from everyone else. I don't know if I can trust you, she said quietly. I know, but I'm asking you to try. He stood, came around the table, crouched beside her chair so they were eye level. Stay, not because you're forced to, but because you choose to. Give me a chance to prove I can be what Mila needs, what you need. And if you can't, if you keep making the same choices, keep living the same life, then you'll have every right to throw it in my face. His hand covered hers. But at least give me the chance to try. Nora looked at him, this complicated, dangerous, devoted man who was both her captor and her child's father. Every logical part of her brain screamed to refuse, to keep fighting, to never stop looking for escape. But another part, the part that had loved him once and maybe never fully stopped, whispered that maybe he could change. Maybe this could work. Maybe, for Mila's sake, it was worth trying. One chance, she said finally. You get one chance to prove you can be better than what you are. That's all I'm asking. He lifted her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. Thank you. From the bassinet, Mila made a small sound, not crying, just existing, reminding them both of why this mattered. Adrian stood, moved to look down at his sleeping daughter, and Nora saw his expression transform into something almost reverent. I won't let her down, he said quietly. I won't let either of you down. Whether that was a promise he could keep remained to be seen. But watching him with Mila, seeing the fierce devotion in his eyes, Nora felt the first small crack in the wall she'd built around her heart. Maybe Adrian Morello could change. Maybe love was enough to transform a monster into something better. Maybe this impossible situation could become something bearable, even good. Or maybe she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Time would tell which truth would win. The days that followed settled into an uneasy rhythm. Nora woke each morning in the luxurious bedroom that felt like a beautiful trap, cared for Mila with the desperate focus of someone who needed purpose, and tried to navigate a life that existed in the space between captivity and consent. Adrian kept his distance, mostly. He appeared for breakfast when his schedule allowed, always asking about Mila's night, always offering to help in ways that felt genuine rather than controlling. He worked long hours in his office, taking calls in Italian and Russian that Nora tried not to overhear, managing an empire she still didn't fully understand. But every evening, he carved out time to be with their daughter, learning to change diapers with fumbling determination, reading board books in his deep voice, holding Mila against his chest while she slept like she was the most precious thing he'd ever touched. Watching them together did something complicated to Nora's heart. This was what she'd wanted when she first discovered she was pregnant. A father who was present, devoted, willing to show up. The fact that he was also a criminal lord who'd essentially kidnapped them should have negated everything else. But love wasn't that simple, and neither was family. 3 weeks into their new existence, Nora was reading in the library when Adrian found her. Mila was napping in the portable bassinet nearby, and the afternoon sun slanted through the tall windows, making everything feel almost peaceful. "We need to talk," Adrian said from the doorway. Nora looked up from her book, immediately wary. "About what?" "About the future. About making this permanent." He crossed to sit in the chair across from hers. "I want to marry you." The words hung in the air like a detonation. Nora stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "You what?" "I want to marry you. Legally, officially, permanently." His expression was serious, intent. "I want Mila to have both parents with the same last name. I want you protected under my name, my resources, my authority. I want there to be no question about where you belong." "I belong to myself." The response was automatic, defensive. Poor word choice. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I want you to choose to belong with me, to build something legitimate and lasting, to give our daughter the stability of married parents." Marriage doesn't create stability. Love does, trust does. Things we don't have. Not yet, but we could build them. His eyes held hers with that intensity that always made her feel exposed. "I'm not asking you to love me right now. I'm asking you to commit to trying, to giving us a real chance instead of just coexisting in the same space." "Why?" Nora set down her book, needing something to do with her hands. "Why does it matter if we're married? I'm already here. I'm already trapped. What difference does a piece of paper make?" "It makes you my wife instead of my captive. It makes this a partnership instead of a prison." His voice softened. "And it protects you in ways you don't understand. If something happens to me, if I'm arrested or killed, being my wife means you inherit everything. My resources, my protection, my ability to keep Mila safe. Without that legal tie, you'd be vulnerable to people who'd use you and discard you without hesitation." The practicality of his argument was hard to dismiss, but Nora's every instinct rebelled against it. "You're asking me to marry you for legal protection and optics. I'm asking you to marry me because I love you. The protection and optics are just benefits." He stood, moved to crouch beside her chair. "I know I've handled this badly. I know bringing you here the way I did was wrong, but I'm trying to make this work, Nora. I'm trying to give you choices where I can." Choosing between marriage and continued uncertainty isn't really a choice. It's more choice than most people in your position would get. His hand covered hers. "And I'm offering you something real, a partnership, a voice in decisions that affect our family, the ability to influence how I run my business, how I use my power. Marry me, and you're not just my wife. You're my partner, my equal in everything that matters." "Equal?" She laughed bitterly. "How can we be equal when you hold all the power?" "Because I'm giving you power." He pulled a small box from his pocket, opened it to reveal a ring that was beautiful without being ostentatious, a single diamond set in platinum, elegant and simple. "Say yes, and I'll show you exactly what I mean." Nora stared at the ring, her heart pounding. Every rational part of her knew this was manipulation, coercion dressed up as romance. But another part, the part that remembered loving him, that watched him be gentle with their daughter, that wanted to believe people could change, that part whispered that maybe this was her path forward. Not escape, but transformation. Not freedom, but influence. "I need time to think," she said. "Take all the time you need." He closed the box, set it on the table between them. "But while you're thinking, I want to show you something." He stood, offered his hand. Nora hesitated, then took it, letting him pull her to her feet. He lifted Mila carefully from the bassinet, cradling her with increasing confidence, then led them through the house to a room Nora hadn't seen before. It was an office, but smaller and more personal than Adrian's official workspace. The desk was antique, beautiful, positioned near windows overlooking the gardens. Bookshelves lined one wall, and Nora recognized immediately that they were filled with social work texts, child development research, policy analysis, everything related to the field she'd been studying. "This is for you," Adrian said, watching her reaction. "Your office, your space, everything you need to finish your degree and start your career is here or can be arranged. I've already contacted your graduate program. They're willing to let you complete your coursework remotely and defend your thesis via video conference." Nora moved through the space, touching the books, the quality desk, the ergonomic chair. It was perfect, thoughtful, exactly what she would have designed for herself if she'd had unlimited resources. Which meant it was also exactly the kind of trap that felt like freedom. "You're trying to buy me," she said quietly. "I'm trying to give you purpose beyond just being Mila's mother." He shifted the baby to his shoulder. "You wanted to help vulnerable children. This gives you the ability to actually do it, not through some underfunded nonprofit that fights for scraps, but through a foundation with real money and real power to make systemic change. A foundation you control. A foundation you run. With my money, yes, but your vision, your values, your decisions about who to help and how." His voice was earnest, persuasive. "Think about it, Nora. You could actually fix the foster care system that failed you. You could create programs that give kids real support instead of just processing them through the system. You could be the person you needed when you were young." The offer was devastating in its appeal. This was her dream, the whole reason she'd pursued social work in the first place. But accepting it meant accepting Adrian's money, his influence, his world. It meant becoming complicit in everything he was. "I can't," she whispered. "Yes, you can. You're just afraid of what it means." He moved closer. "I'm not asking you to approve of everything I do. I'm asking you to use the resources my work generates to do something good, to be the moral compass I've never had." "That's not fair. You can't put that responsibility on me." "I'm not. I'm offering you the ability to make a difference. What you do with it is entirely your choice." He paused. "But know this, whether you marry me or not, whether you accept this office or not, I'm setting up the foundation anyway. In Mila's name. She'll inherit resources and power beyond anything you can imagine, and when she's old enough, she'll have to decide how to use them. Wouldn't it be better if she had a mother who showed her how to transform dirty money into something clean? How to use power for good instead of just accumulation?" The argument was elegant, logical, and completely devastating. He was right. If Mila was going to grow up as Adrian Morello's daughter, she'd need guidance on how to navigate that legacy. She'd need someone to show her that power could be used for more than just control. "This is emotional blackmail," Nora said, but the words lacked conviction. "This is reality, and I'm giving you the ability to shape it." He handed Mila back to her. "Think about the marriage proposal. Think about the foundation. Think about what kind of life you want to build here. But while you're thinking, know that I'm committed to being better, to showing you through actions, not just words, that I can change." Before Nora could respond, Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression hardened into something cold and dangerous that reminded her exactly what he was underneath the devoted father persona. "I need to take this," he said. "It's important." He left the office, already speaking in rapid Italian as he walked away. Nora stood in her new workspace holding their daughter, surrounded by the tools to pursue her dreams, and felt the walls of her golden cage become just slightly more beautiful. That night, she couldn't sleep again. She lay in bed thinking about Adrian's proposal, about the foundation, about the impossible choice between principle and pragmatism. Around midnight, she gave up on rest and went to check on Mila. The nursery was dark, except for the soft glow of the nightlight. Nora approached the crib, expecting to find her daughter sleeping peacefully, and instead found Adrian already there, standing over Mila with an expression of such raw tenderness that it made Nora's breath catch. "I didn't hear you come in," she said softly. "I couldn't sleep." He didn't look away from the baby. "I keep thinking about all the time I've missed, all the moments I'll never get back." Nora moved to stand beside him, looking down at their sleeping daughter. "She won't remember. She'll only know the father you are from now forward. That's what terrifies me." His voice was barely above a whisper. "What if I fail her?
What if I become my father, cold, brutal, teaching her that power is all that matters? The vulnerability in the admission shocked her. Who was your father? A monster. Adrian's jaw tightened. He ran the organization before me, built it through fear and violence. He taught me that love was weakness, that mercy was failure, that the only thing that mattered was control. He paused. He beat that lesson into me until I believed it. Is that why you do what you do? Because he trained you for it? I do what I do because I'm good at it. Because when he died and I took over, I saw a chance to be different, less violent, more strategic, using power to create order instead of chaos. His hand trembled slightly as he touched Mila's cheek. But I'm still his son. I still have his cruelty in me, his capacity for violence, and I'm terrified of passing that to her. Nora felt something shift in her chest. This was the truth she'd been searching for. Not the polished explanations or strategic justifications, but the raw fear underneath. Adrian wasn't just a criminal. He was a damaged man trying to break a cycle he wasn't sure he could escape. You don't have to be him, she said quietly. You can choose differently. Can I? Or am I just pretending I have a choice while following the same path? He finally looked at her, and the pain in his eyes was devastating. My father never loved my mother. He kept her like property, used her to produce an heir, then discarded her when I was old enough to be useful. She died alone, broken by a man who saw her as a tool. I swore I'd never be like that. And then I brought you here by force, took away your freedom, made you a prisoner in everything but name. How am I any different from him? You're asking the question. That's different. Nora's hand covered his on the crib rail. Your father wouldn't have cared if what he did was wrong. You do care. That matters. Does it? Or does it just make me a more self-aware monster? It makes you someone who can change, if you choose to. She took a breath, made a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. Show me. Show you what? Your world. The real version, not the sanitized explanation. Show me what you actually do, who you really are, and let me decide if I can live with it. She met his eyes. No more secrets. No more protection through ignorance. If you want me to marry you, if you want me to build a life here, I need to know exactly what that life means. Adrian stared at her for a long moment, and she could see him calculating, weighing risks, considering whether honesty was more dangerous than continued deception. If I show you everything, he said slowly, you might hate me even more than you already do. Maybe, but at least I'll hate you for the truth instead of the mystery. She squeezed his hand. You said you wanted me to be your partner, your equal. Partners don't hide things from each other. Partners also protect each other from unnecessary darkness. Let me decide what's necessary. Her voice was firm. I'm not a child who needs protection from reality. I'm a mother trying to figure out if I can build a life with a man I don't fully understand. Help me understand. He was silent for several heartbeats, his eyes searching hers. Then he nodded slowly. Tomorrow. I'll show you tomorrow. He paused. But Mila stays here with Maria. I won't expose our daughter to any of this. Agreed. The thought of leaving Mila made her anxious, but she trusted Maria. The woman had proven herself kind and competent over the past weeks. What will I see? The machinery that makes my world function. The good, the bad, and the morally complicated. His expression was grim. After tomorrow, you won't be able to unknow any of it. I already can't unknow what I heard that night in your apartment. This is just filling in the details. Details matter. They're the difference between theory and reality. He lifted her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. Get some sleep. Tomorrow will be long. He left her alone in the nursery, and Nora stood looking down at Mila, wondering if she'd just made a terrible mistake or the first step towards something real. The next morning dawned cold and clear. Nora fed Mila, played with her, then handed her over to Maria with instructions that felt inadequate for the anxiety churning in her stomach. She'll be fine, Maria assured her, settling the baby on her hip with practiced ease. I raised 3 of my own. This one will be spoiled and happy when you return. Adrian was waiting in the foyer, dressed in a dark suit that made him look every inch the powerful businessman. But there was something harder in his bearing today,
a readiness for violence that he usually kept hidden around her. "Ready?" he asked. "No, but let's go anyway." The car ride took them into the city, to a neighborhood Nora didn't recognize. Industrial buildings, warehouses, streets that felt forgotten by urban renewal. They pulled up to a nondescript building with no signage, just a steel door and cameras covering every angle. "This is one of my distribution centers," Adrian said as they exited the car. His security flanked them immediately. "Legitimate imports and exports, all properly documented and taxed. 90% of what moves through here is completely legal. And the other 10%? That's what I want you to see." He placed his hand on her lower back, guided her toward the entrance. "Remember, you asked for this." Inside, the warehouse was exactly what it appeared to be. Workers moving pallets, forklifts transporting cargo, the organized chaos of logistics operations. But Adrian led her past all of that, through a door marked private, down a hallway, into an office where 3 men waited. They stood immediately when Adrian entered, their deference obvious and immediate. These were his lieutenants, Nora realized. The men who ran the actual criminal operations while Adrian maintained his distance. "Gentlemen, this is Nora Blake, my partner and the mother of my daughter." Adrian's introduction was deliberate, establishing her status. "She's here to understand our operations. Full transparency." The men exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable, but none of them questioned Adrian's decision. He gestured for everyone to sit, then began what amounted to a briefing on organized crime as a business. They discussed territories, neighborhoods, and districts divided like corporate regions, each with managers and revenue streams. They talked about products that ranged from legitimate imports to illegal gambling operations to protection services that weren't quite extortion but weren't quite voluntary either. They showed her ledgers that tracked money laundering through legitimate businesses, turning dirty cash into clean assets. And they talked about violence. Not glorifying it, but acknowledging it as a tool of last resort, a way to maintain order when other methods failed. "Last month we had an issue with the Ukrainians encroaching on our territory in Red Hook," one of the lieutenants explained, showing her a map. "They were running their own gambling operations, undercutting our prices, threatening our established clients." "What did you do?" Nora asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "First we negotiated, offered them a percentage to operate under our umbrella, maintain peace." The man glanced at Adrian before continuing. "They declined, aggressively." So we made it clear that operating in our territory without permission had consequences." Adrian's voice was flat, emotionless. "We disrupted their supply lines, made it impossible for them to run their operations profitably. When they escalated with violence against one of our collectors, we responded proportionally." Meaning what exactly? Meaning their operation was shut down permanently. Their leader was given a choice: leave the city or face consequences that would extend to everyone associated with him. Adrian's eyes held hers. He chose to leave. And if he hadn't? Then the consequences would have been severe enough to make other people think twice about similar decisions. His voice was calm, but the message was clear. "I don't initiate violence, Nora, but I respond to it decisively. That's how order is maintained." The clinical discussion of violence, the casual way they talked about threatening people's livelihoods and lives, made Nora's stomach turn. But she forced herself to listen, to understand, to see the full picture of what Adrian's world actually looked like. They spent 3 hours in that office, walking through operations and decisions and the complex machinery of an organization that existed in the gray space between legitimate and criminal. Adrian answered every question honestly, showed her numbers and strategies, and the reasoning behind choices that made her skin crawl. Finally, he stood. "That's the overview. Do you want to see more?" "More?" "The street level, where the theory becomes practice." He watched her carefully. "Or is this enough?" Nora wanted to say it was enough, wanted to retreat to the estate and pretend she'd never seen any of this. But she'd asked for truth, and partial truth was just another form of lie. "Show me," she said. They left the warehouse, drove to neighborhoods where poverty and desperation were visible on every corner. Adrian pointed out businesses he owned, corner stores, check cashing operations, small restaurants, all legitimate on paper, all serving as fronts or laundering operations for money that originated elsewhere. He showed her a community center his organization funded, where kids from struggling families could get after-school programs and meals and tutoring. This is what your foundation could do, he said quietly. Take money from questionable sources and transform it into something that actually helps people. He showed her protection operations, businesses that paid for security that was both insurance and extortion, a fee for being left alone by threats that sometimes came from Adrian's own organization. And he showed her those people who worked for him, not just the lieutenants and enforcers, but the drivers and accountants and legitimate employees who depended on his operations for their livelihoods, who saw him as a businessman rather than a criminal. By the time they returned to the estate, Nora's head was spinning. The reality of Adrian's world was so much more complicated than simple good and evil. It was parasitic and symbiotic simultaneously, extracting wealth while providing services, maintaining order through threats while preventing worse chaos. It was morally repugnant and pragmatically effective in equal measure. Maria met them at the door with Mila, who reached immediately for Nora with a happy squeal. Nora took her daughter, buried her face in that sweet baby smell, and tried to reconcile the life she wanted for Mila with the reality of what Adrian's resources could provide. "Thank you, Maria," Adrian said, dismissing the housekeeper gently. When they were alone, he turned to Nora. Well? Well, what? You've seen everything now. The good, the bad, the complicated. Can you live with it? Nora looked down at Mila, then up at the man who'd given her this child, this impossible situation, this choice that wasn't really a choice at all. I don't know, she said honestly, but I understand it now, and that's something. It's more than I expected. He touched Mila's head gently. I meant what I said about changing, about building something more legitimate over time. But I can't walk away overnight. The vacuum would be too dangerous for us and for everyone who depends on the organization's stability. I know. And she did. That was perhaps the most devastating realization, that Adrian couldn't simply stop being what he was without causing ripple effects that would hurt people. But if you're serious about change, I need to see progress, real, measurable steps toward legitimacy. You'll see them. His voice was firm with promise. Starting with the foundation. You'll run it, control it, make it everything you dreamed it could be. And I'll support every decision you make, even when they conflict with my interests. Why? The question burst out. Why give me that power? Because you're the only person I trust to use it right. Because Mila deserves to see her mother making the world better, not just existing in my shadow. Because I love you, and proving that means giving you real control, not just the illusion of it. He stepped closer, his free hand cupping her face. Marry me, Nora. Be my partner in building something better. Help me become the man our daughter deserves. Standing there in the foyer of his fortress, holding their daughter, having seen the full truth of his world, Nora made the decision that would define the rest of her life. Yes, she whispered. I'll marry you. The relief that flooded Adrian's face when Nora spoke that single word was so profound it almost broke her. He pulled her close, carefully, mindful of Mila between them, and pressed his forehead to hers. You won't regret this, he whispered. I promise you won't regret this. Nora wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him, because she'd just committed to building a life with a man whose world was built on foundations she found morally questionable at best. But she'd also seen something in him today. Vulnerability, honesty, a genuine desire to be better than what he'd been raised to become. Maybe that was enough. Maybe it had to be. The wedding happened 3 weeks later, small and private in the estate's garden. Just Maria and a handful of Adrian's most trusted people as witnesses, a judge who owed Adrian favors presiding, and Mila in a white dress that made her look like a tiny angel. No elaborate celebration, no extended family, no pretense that this was anything other than what it was. Two people choosing partnership for complicated reasons that had as much to do with survival as love. But when Adrian slipped the ring on Nora's finger and said his vows with an intensity that made her chest ache, when she promised to build a life with him, despite everything she knew, something shifted. This wasn't the romantic fantasy she'd once imagined. It was something rawer, more real, forged in truth rather than illusion. I love you, Adrian said after the judge declared them married, his hands framing her face. I've loved you since I saw you pretending to understand abstract art. I'll love you until I stop breathing. I know. And she did. Whatever else was uncertain, Adrian's devotion was absolute.
I'm choosing to trust that. He kissed her then, gentle and reverent, nothing like the passionate encounters from their past. And Nora felt the weight of her decision settle over her like a mantle she'd wear for the rest of her life. Mrs. Adrian Morello, mother, partner, the moral compass for an empire built on morally ambiguous foundations. The real work began the next day. Nora threw herself into the foundation with the determination of someone who needed purpose to survive. She hired staff, social workers, and policy experts and advocates who shared her vision for systemic change. She developed programs that addressed the failures she'd experienced firsthand in foster care: stable housing, mental health support, educational resources, mentorship that didn't disappear when kids aged out of the system. And she used Adrian's money without apology, transforming resources gained through questionable means into concrete help for vulnerable children. Every dollar she spent was a dollar redirected from violence to healing, from exploitation to support. It didn't erase where the money came from, but it gave it new purpose. Adrian kept his promise about transparency. He included her in strategic decisions, asked for her input on operations, and actually listened when she pushed back against choices that crossed her ethical lines. He didn't always agree, and he didn't always change course. But he heard her. That mattered more than she'd expected. But progress toward legitimacy was slower than Nora wanted. Adrian explained it like dismantling a bomb. One wrong move and everything exploded. He couldn't simply abandon criminal enterprises without creating power vacuums that would be filled by people with no restraint. He couldn't walk away from territories without endangering people who depended on his organization's stability. Every step toward legitimate business had to be carefully calculated to avoid chaos. "I'm not making excuses," he told her one night as they reviewed his transition plans in his office. Mila was asleep upstairs, and they'd fallen into a routine of these late-night strategy sessions. "But I need you to understand, I can't just flip a switch and become legitimate. It's a process measured in years, not months." "How many years?" Nora asked, highlighting a section of the business plan that concerned her. 5, maybe 7. To fully transition the major operations into legal enterprises and divest from the criminal elements entirely. He paused. "But you'll see progress every quarter. Measurable reduction in illegal revenue, increase in legitimate holdings, documented steps toward the version of this organization you can live with. And the violence? When does that end?" "When I have enough legitimate power that violence becomes unnecessary." His expression was grim. "Right now, it's still the language my world speaks, but I'm working to change that vocabulary." 3 months into their marriage, the first real test came. Nora was working in her office when Adrian appeared in the doorway, his face set in lines she'd learned to recognize as dangerous. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. She set down her pen. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that requires a response, the kind where my restraint is being interpreted as weakness." He crossed to her desk. "One of my distribution managers was killed last night, executed in front of his family as a message to me." Horror flooded through her. "Who?" "Doesn't matter who did it. What matters is I need to respond, and I wanted you to know before I act." His jaw was tight. "This is the part of my world you can't fix with foundation programs, Nora. This is the violence I've been protecting you from." "What are you going to do?" "What I have to. Send a message that killing my people has consequences severe enough that no one tries it again." He paused. "I'm telling you this because you asked for transparency, but I'm not asking your permission. This is a decision I have to make as the head of this organization." Nora felt sick. This was the reality she'd signed up for. The violence that maintained order, the brutality that prevented worse chaos. But knowing it intellectually was different from confronting it directly. "Don't kill anyone," she said quietly. "Please, find another way to send your message." "Nora, I know what you're going to say. That sometimes violence is the only language these people understand. That showing mercy makes you vulnerable. That you have to be brutal to maintain control." She stood, moved around the desk to face him. "But you promised me you were changing. You promised you'd be better. Prove it. Find a way to respond that doesn't involve more death." Adrian stared at her for a long moment, conflict visible in his eyes. "If I show weakness now, more people die. More families get visits like the one that happened last night. You understand that?" "I understand you believe that. I'm asking you to consider that maybe there's another way." She touched his face.
You're Adrian Morello. You have resources and connections and power that most people can't imagine. Use that instead of violence. Be smarter than the people who think death is the only answer. He caught her hand, held it against his cheek. You're asking me to risk everything on the hope that intelligence can replace brutality. I'm asking you to try. Just try. If it fails, if it makes things worse, then you do what you think is necessary. But give mercy a chance first. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of the decision. Finally, Adrian nodded slowly. One chance. But if this backfires, if my restraint gets more people hurt, we do this my way next time. Agreed. He kissed her forehead, then left to handle the crisis. Nora returned to her desk, but she couldn't focus on work. She just asked Adrian to risk his organization's stability on her moral principles. If people died because of her influence, their blood would be on her hands as surely as if she'd pulled the trigger herself. The waiting was agony. Hours passed with no word. Nora tried to work, tried to focus on Mila, tried to pretend she wasn't terrified that she'd just made a catastrophic mistake. Finally, near midnight, Adrian returned. He looked exhausted, but there was something almost like wonder in his expression. What happened? Nora asked immediately. I found the people responsible, had them brought to me. He sank into the chair across from her desk. Instead of killing them, I gave them a choice. Work for me, under my supervision, and their families stay safe. Or refuse, and I dismantle everything they've built, their operations, their assets, their reputations, without touching them physically. And they took the deal. Within 2 hours, I'd absorbed their entire network, gained territory and resources, and sent a message that was more devastating than violence ever could have been. He shook his head slightly. You were right. Intelligence worked better than brutality. The fear of losing everything they'd built was more effective than the fear of death. Relief made Nora's knees weak. So no one died. No one died, and I gained more power than I would have through violence. He stood, pulled her into his arms. You saved lives tonight, Nora. Theirs and probably dozens of others who would have gotten caught in the retaliation cycle. Thank you for pushing me to try. She held him tight, feeling the tension in his body slowly release. This was what partnership looked like, challenging each other, finding better solutions together, building something neither of them could create alone. This is just the beginning, she said against his chest. Keep choosing differently. Keep being smarter than the violence, and we'll build something Mila can be proud of. I will. The promise was absolute. I swear to you, I will. The months that followed proved Adrian's commitment. He began systematically replacing violence with strategy, intimidation with intelligence, brutality with business acumen. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments that required shows of force, still decisions that made Nora's stomach turn. But the trajectory was clear. Adrian was changing, and his organization was changing with him. Nora's foundation grew from a promising start to a genuine force for systemic change. They opened residential facilities for teens aging out of foster care, providing housing and support that didn't disappear at 18. They funded legal advocacy for children trapped in failing systems. They created scholarship programs and mentorship networks and policy initiatives that addressed root causes instead of just symptoms. And they did it all with money that had once fueled exploitation, now redirected toward healing. Mila turned 1 year old in a celebration that included the staff who'd become extended family, the foundation employees who treated Nora like a hero, and a handful of Adrian's associates who looked at the baby like she was their collective hope for redemption. She smashed cake with gleeful abandon, took her first wobbly steps between her parents, and laughed with pure joy at the attention. Watching her daughter grow up loved and safe, and surrounded by people who'd protect her with their lives, Nora felt something she hadn't expected. Contentment. Not the simple happiness of her fantasy life, but something deeper and more complex. The satisfaction of building something real from impossible circumstances. She's perfect, Adrian said that night after the party, watching Mila sleep in her crib. And she's going to change everything. She already has, Nora replied, leaning against his side. She changed you, changed me, changed what we thought was possible. I never imagined I could have this. A family, a partner who makes me better, a daughter who makes me want to be worthy of her love. His arm tightened around Nora's shoulders. You gave me that.
We gave each other that. She looked up at him. I'm not going to pretend this has been easy or that I don't still struggle with parts of your world, but I chose you. I keep choosing you because underneath everything else, you're a good man trying to be better. I'm a criminal trying to be legitimate. There's a difference. Not as much as you think. She turned in his arms, wrapped hers around his neck. You protected me even when I ran. You gave me choices when you could have just taken control. You listened when I challenged you. You changed when I asked you to try. That's not a criminal, Adrian. That's a partner. He kissed her then, deep and claiming and full of emotion he'd never been good at expressing in words. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, his forehead rested against hers. I love you, he said, more than I thought I was capable of loving anything. I know. And this time when she said it, Nora meant something different than before. Not just acknowledgement of his feelings, but acceptance, trust, the beginning of reciprocation. I'm learning to love you too. The real you, not the fantasy I created. And that version is better than anything I imagined. 2 years after their wedding, Adrian called a meeting with his top lieutenants. Nora attended at his request, sitting beside him as he laid out a plan that represented the culmination of everything they'd been building toward. We're transitioning entirely to legitimate operations over the next 18 months, he announced, and Nora could see the shock ripple through the room. Every illegal enterprise will be sold, absorbed into legal frameworks, or shut down. Our revenue streams will come from legitimate businesses, real estate development, import-export that's actually legal, private security, consulting. The criminal elements of this organization end now. Boss, that's, one of the lieutenants started. Not negotiable. Adrian's voice was firm. I've spent 2 years building the infrastructure to make this work. We have enough legitimate power now that we don't need the criminal operations to maintain stability. And I have a daughter who deserves better than growing up as the child of a crime lord. He laid out the specifics, which operations would be sold to whom, how territories would be managed during the transition, what support would be provided to people whose livelihoods depended on the criminal enterprises. It was comprehensive, carefully planned, and represented a complete transformation of everything Adrian had built. Some of you won't want to make this transition, Adrian continued. I understand. You'll be given generous severance and connections to organizations that still operate the old way. But if you stay with me, you stay legitimate. Those are the only options. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Some people pushed back, some accepted reluctantly. Some seemed genuinely relieved to be leaving the criminal world behind. But by the end, everyone understood. This wasn't a proposal. It was happening, with or without their support. After they left, Nora turned to Adrian. That was brave and terrifying, and I'm so proud of you I could cry. Save the tears for when we actually pull this off. But his hand found hers under the table, gripping tight. I'm terrified too. This could fail spectacularly. Other organizations could see this as an opportunity to move into our territories. We could lose everything. Or we could build something unprecedented, a legitimate empire that started in darkness but chose to walk toward light. She squeezed his hand. Either way, we do it together. The transition was as difficult as Adrian feared. There were challenges from rival organizations, resistance from people who didn't want change, moments where violence seemed like the only solution. But Adrian held firm, and Nora stood beside him, and together they navigated the dangerous waters between what they'd been and what they were becoming. Not all of it was clean. Some compromises had to be made, some deals struck that weren't entirely ethical, some uses of power that made Nora uncomfortable. But the trajectory was clear and irreversible. Adrian was dismantling his criminal empire and building something legitimate in its place. 18 months after that meeting, Adrian Morello held a press conference announcing the launch of Morello Enterprises, a legitimate business conglomerate focused on real estate development, international trade, and private security. The foundation Nora ran was prominently featured as the company's charitable arm, showcasing millions of dollars in philanthropic work. No one asked where the money had come from originally. No one questioned how Adrian had amassed his initial fortune. The press focused on what he was building now: jobs, community development, support for vulnerable populations. The transformation was complete. That night, Nora and Adrian sat on the terrace of their estate,
watching Mila play in the garden with the kind of security that no longer needed to carry visible weapons. The threat level had dropped dramatically, as Adrian's transition to legitimacy removed most of the reasons people would target them. "We did it," Adrian said quietly. "We actually did it." "You did it. I just pushed you to try." Nora leaned against him, watching their daughter chase butterflies in the fading light. "No, we did it together. You showed me it was possible. You gave me a reason to change. You built the foundation that proved dirty money could create clean outcomes." He turned to look at her. "I couldn't have done any of this without you. And I couldn't have built the foundation without your resources. We needed each other." She smiled. "Still do. Always will." He pulled a small box from his pocket, opened it to reveal a new ring. Simple, elegant, beautiful. "I gave you a ring when I asked you to marry me out of necessity and protection. This one is different. This one is because I love you, because you're my partner in everything that matters, because I choose you every day, just like you choose me." Nora felt tears prick her eyes as he slid the ring onto her finger beside her wedding band. "It's beautiful. It's a promise that I'll keep being better, that I'll keep choosing the harder right over the easier wrong, that I'll spend the rest of my life earning the trust you've given me." His hand cupped her face. "You saved me, Nora. From becoming my father, from losing myself completely to the darkness, from a life that had no meaning beyond power and control. You gave me something worth being better for." "You saved me too," she whispered, "from running forever, from raising Mila alone and afraid, from a small life defined by fear. You gave me resources to actually make a difference, a partner who challenges me, a family I didn't know I needed." They kissed as the sun set over the gardens, two people who'd found each other in darkness and chosen to build something luminous. The path hadn't been simple or clean. There'd been moral compromises and difficult choices and moments where the right answer wasn't clear, but they'd walked it together, transforming what started as captivity into genuine partnership. Mila's laughter rang out across the garden, and they broke apart to watch her toddle toward them with arms outstretched, trusting completely that her parents would catch her. Adrian lifted their daughter, settled her on his hip, and looked at Nora with an expression of such profound gratitude and love that it took her breath away. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything. Thank you for being worth the risk." She stood, wrapped her arms around both of them. "For proving that people can change, that love is stronger than fear, that even the darkest past can lead to a bright future." 3 years later, Nora stood in front of the state legislature presenting findings from her foundation's work and lobbying for systemic reforms to the foster care system. Adrian sat in the gallery watching, Mila, now 4 years old and precociously articulate, beside him asking whispered questions about what Mommy was doing. The little girl had grown into a force of nature, combining Nora's passionate empathy with Adrian's strategic intelligence. She was loved fiercely by both parents, protected but not sheltered, raised to understand that privilege came with responsibility to help others. After Nora's testimony, which received applause from legislators on both sides of the aisle, Adrian met her in the hallway with Mila in his arms. "You were brilliant," he said, pride evident in every word. "Mommy made them listen," Mila added seriously. "You said she would, and she did." "She always makes people listen." Adrian kissed Nora's cheek. "Because she speaks truth they need to hear." That night, after Mila was asleep, Nora and Adrian sat in their private study reviewing the Foundation's impact reports. 5 years of work, thousands of children helped, measurable improvements in outcomes for vulnerable youth. The numbers told a story of transformation, dirty money redeemed through purposeful action. "I've been thinking," Adrian said, setting aside the report he'd been reading, "about writing it all down. My story. How I started, what I did, how I changed. Not to glorify any of it, but to show that redemption is possible even from the darkest places. You'd have to admit to crimes, face legal consequences potentially." Nora's legal mind immediately saw the risks. Statute of limitations has passed on most of it, and anything recent enough to prosecute happened under the umbrella of transition. Messy, but arguably legal. He paused. "I've talked to lawyers. I could tell my story without destroying everything we've built." "Why would you want to?" "Because Mila will ask questions someday about where our money came from, how I built this empire, what her father really was before he became legitimate. His expression was serious. I want her to have the truth. Not sanitized or romanticized, but honest. So she understands that people are complex, that mistakes don't define you if you choose to change, that even the worst past doesn't prevent a better future. Nora considered this. It's brave and risky and completely like you to turn confession into teaching. I learned from the best. He pulled her close. You've spent 5 years turning my criminal assets into programs that help children. The least I can do is use my story the same way, as a cautionary tale and proof that change is possible. Then do it. Write it down. Be honest about everything. She looked up at him. And I'll write my part. The woman who ran, who fought, who eventually chose to stay and build something better. Together, we'll give Mila the truth she deserves. The project took 2 years. Adrian's unflinching account of his rise in organized crime, the violence he'd ordered and witnessed, the moral compromises he'd made. Nora's parallel narrative of falling in love, discovering the truth, fleeing in fear, and ultimately choosing partnership over safety. Both of them brutally honest about the complexity of their choices, the weight of their decisions, the difficulty of transformation. When Mila was 7, old enough to begin understanding complexity, they sat her down with age-appropriate versions of their stories. Your father did bad things before you were born, Nora explained, holding her daughter's small hands. He hurt people and made choices that were wrong, but then he decided to be better, to change everything about how he lived. And he did it because he loved you and wanted to be worthy of being your father. And your mother was brave enough to give me a chance to change, Adrian added, even though she had every reason to run and never look back. She chose to believe people could be better than their worst mistakes. Mila looked between them with those devastating dark eyes, her father's eyes, that saw far too much for a 7-year-old. Are you still changing? Every day, Adrian promised. Every day I try to be better than I was yesterday. Sometimes I succeed, sometimes I fail, but I never stop trying. Because that's what love means, Nora said softly. Choosing to be better for the people who matter, choosing to build instead of destroy, choosing hope over fear. Okay. Mila seemed to absorb this, process it with her characteristic seriousness. Then I'll choose that too. When I grow up, I'll help people like Mommy does. And I'll be smart like Daddy. And I'll make our family proud. You already do, little one. Adrian lifted her onto his lap. You already do. Years later, when Mila was 16 and preparing for college, she asked her father about his past with the directness she'd inherited from both parents. Did you ever kill anyone? She asked over dinner one evening. Adrian didn't flinch from the question. I ordered things that resulted in people dying. I didn't pull triggers myself, but I was responsible. Yes. Do you regret it? Every day. Those decisions haunt me. His voice was steady but heavy with truth. I can't undo them. I can't bring those people back. All I can do is try to create enough good in the world to balance some of the harm I caused. It won't ever be enough, but I have to try. That's why the foundation exists, Nora added. Why we've dedicated our resources to helping vulnerable people. We can't erase the past, but we can build a better future. Mila nodded slowly. I want to go into law, criminal justice reform. Use what I know about how these systems work to change them from the inside. Bishop, she looked at both parents. Is that okay? It's perfect, Adrian said, his voice rough with emotion. Use everything you've learned from our mistakes to build something better. That's all we could ask for. When Mila left for college 2 years later, Nora and Adrian stood in the driveway watching her car disappear toward her future, arms around each other. We raised a crusader, Adrian said quietly. We raised our daughter to believe in justice tempered with mercy, in change instead of condemnation, in using power to lift others instead of controlling them. Nora leaned into him. We gave her the best of both of us, and none of the worst. She's going to change the world. She already has, just by being who she is, by proving that even people born into darkness can choose light. Nora turned in his arms. We did good, Adrian. Against all odds, through every complication, we built something beautiful. We built everything. He kissed her forehead. A family. A legacy. Proof that redemption isn't just possible. It's achievable through consistent choice and unconditional love. 25 years after Adrian found Nora in that small apartment in Millbrook, they sat together at a gala celebrating the foundation's anniversary. The organization had grown beyond anything Nora initially imagined, operating in 12 states, helping thousands of children annually, driving policy changes that transformed systems. Mila, now 30, and a respected prosecutor known for her nuanced approach to justice, gave a speech about her parents' legacy that brought tears to Nora's eyes. "My parents taught me that people are more than their worst mistakes," Mila said from the podium, her voice strong and clear. "My father built an empire on questionable foundations, then had the courage to transform it into something legitimate and good. My mother chose partnership over safety, love over fear, and used dirty money to create clean outcomes. Together, they proved that the past doesn't have to define the future. That change is possible. That redemption is real." She paused, her eyes finding her parents in the audience. "Everything I am, everything I've been able to accomplish, exists because two imperfect people chose to be better than their circumstances. Chose love when fear would have been easier. Chose transparency when secrets would have been safer. Chose to build instead of destroy." The applause was thunderous. Nora reached for Adrian's hand under the table, found it already reaching for hers. "We did it," she whispered. "We're still doing it." He brought her hand to his lips. "Every day we choose each other. Every day we choose to be better. That's the real legacy, not the money or the programs or the policy changes. It's the choice to love despite everything." That night, back at the estate that had transformed from prison to home over the decades, Nora and Adrian sat on their terrace under the stars. The same view they'd shared for 25 years, but everything was different now. They'd built a life together that neither could have created alone, messy and complicated and beautiful and real. "If you could go back," Adrian asked quietly, "to that night I showed up at your door in Millbrook, would you change anything?" Nora considered the question seriously. "I'd want to spare us both some pain, some fear, some of the harder moments." She paused. "But no, I wouldn't change the fundamental path, because every difficulty taught us something. Every challenge made us stronger. Every compromise brought us closer to understanding what actually matters. Which is this." She gestured to encompass everything: the estate, the foundation, their family, their life together. Two people who started in the darkest circumstances, choosing every day to build toward light. That's worth every struggle it took to get here. "I love you," Adrian said, the same words he'd spoken countless times over the decades, but still weighted with absolute truth. "I know." Nora smiled, the same response she'd given that first night when she'd agreed to marry him. But now it meant something deeper. Not just acknowledgement, but reciprocation, trust, and the kind of love that survived everything because it was built on choice rather than circumstance. "And I love you too, more than I ever thought possible, more than I knew I was capable of. You taught me that love isn't about perfect people in perfect situations. It's about imperfect people choosing each other despite everything, and building something beautiful from complicated pieces." He pulled her close, and they sat together as they had for 25 years, watching the stars emerge over the forest that had witnessed their transformation from captor and captive to partners in everything that mattered. The story that began with fear and force had become something neither of them expected, a testament to the power of choice, the possibility of redemption, and the transformative nature of love that refused to accept easy answers. They'd built a legacy not in spite of their complicated beginning, but through it, using every difficult moment as foundation for something stronger. In the end, Adrian Morello stopped being the monster Nora had fled and became the man she chose to build a life with. And Nora Blake stopped running and started fighting for the future she wanted instead of just escaping the past she feared. Together, they proved that even the most impossible situations could be transformed through consistent choice, unconditional love, and the courage to keep choosing better. Their daughter would carry that legacy forward, not as burden, but as proof that change was possible, that people were more than their worst decisions, and that love combined with action could transform even the darkest inheritance into something luminous. The story ended not with escape or rescue, but with choice. The choice to stay. The choice to love. The choice to build something better than either of them could have imagined when it began. And that choice, renewed every day for 25 years and counting, was worth everything it cost to get there.